Good evening. G5A and Westland Books presents a conversation around musician and author T.M. Krishna's new book, We the People of India, Decoding a Nation's Symbols, with acclaimed historian and author Manu S. Pillai. This will be followed by an audience Q&A and a book signing with the author. At a time when ideas of nationhood, citizenship, and democracy are being actively debated, this work offers a timely and deeply reflective return to the symbols that shape the Indian Republic. I now invite media and content strategist Kavita Rajwade to lead the conversation from here.
I wish you all a very warm welcome to what is sure to be an evening of stimulating and necessary conversation. Our two guests this evening need no introduction, but I will do my duty here nonetheless. T.M. Krishna, author of the book We the People of India, which we are here to discuss, is a vocalist in the Carnatic tradition and a Sangeeta Kalanidhi awardee. He's also a prominent public intellectual who has won the Raman Magsaysay Award. Krishna is the author of several books, including Sebastian and Sons, A Brief History of Mridangam Makers, and A Southern Music, The Carnatic Story. In conversation with him is Manu S. Pillai, award-winning and immensely popular historian and author of several books, including The Ivory Throne, The Courtesan, the Mahatma, and the Italian Brahmin, my favorite, and most recently, Gods, Guns, and Missionaries. Today, Krishna and Manu will be talking about the ideas and discoveries in the book We the People of India, Decoding a Nation's Symbols. Across the country, we've seen a reclaiming of our national symbols and an assertion of nationalism and patriotism. Simultaneously, we've seen the use of these symbols to exclude and bully. Through the idea of national symbols, T.M. Krishna examines the idea of nationhood and indeed democracy. Why do we need symbols? How do we arrive at them? What were we thinking when we gave ourselves these symbols? The result of this year's long investigation is this book, a deep meditation on citizenship and belonging, freedom and fraternity in an India where all of this is endangered. I now invite both of them on stage to unveil the book.
Thanks. I'll undo this one. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm aware this is a working day, and it's wonderful to see a full room despite the inconveniences of traveling, getting here in Bombay traffic, and so on. TM, thank you for being here in Bombay, and thank you for having me for your book launch. In 2016, 10 years ago, he launched my first book in Chennai, so it is
I remember that.
What you would call a signal honor to be able to sort of help do something for his book 10 years later. In the bio that they just read out about you, it's while they were reading it out, it struck me that the subtitle of the book is Decoding a Nation's Symbols. You've over the last few years been called one of the prime examples of anti-national behavior in this country. What led to an anti-national writing about nationalism and a nation's symbols?
I think that the tag anti-national is actually a tag that means you're being a citizen. So if you're called anti-national, you're doing something right. Simple as that. And it is important you are that kind of an anti-national who asks those difficult questions and maybe don't have the answers, and that's absolutely fine, but you're willing to engage robustly and not do any kind of parochial thinking or hagiography and come face to face with reality as we have it today or in the past and present without an agenda to target any set of people, but with honesty. So if that's what makes me anti-national, then I guess I am the best example of the we in We the People of India.
Wonderful. Like, I don't think, I need to even, I don't think we need more of a book event with
Shall we
an
go
opening
home?
like that. No, but for their benefit, poor things have sat in traffic, so we'll go ahead with some more things. Before we get to the symbols, obviously you're invested in the idea of India as a nation. That's one thing that comes across in the book. So much for being called an anti-national and so on. It is, in some sense, deep love for the country that causes you to even investigate some of these questions. Was it the state of the present that actually got you to look at these questions of the past as to how these symbols emerged? And why really do these symbols matter? What is the nation to you? What is the source of all this love? And what are these symbols in your heart and in your mind?
I'll answer it in kind of three parts. One is, I think, at least for me, there have been many days I've got up in the morning, I've opened my computer, or I've picked up the newspaper, and there's something that is happening in my stomach. Deep sense of, it's disgust sometimes, it's great sadness, and sometimes it's helplessness, honestly. Sometimes like, what do we do? And there is a restlessness attached with it, but you don't know what to do. I mean, sometimes you can't do anything. So that's been happening many times. And I'm sure there are many people in this room and beyond who have had similar feelings. And I think we all try to do what we can in the domains that we are in. Now, that's, I think, somewhere the kernel of this book, that feeling of why are we here? I mean, how is it fine to just abuse somebody from a position of power and not think that there is something just, it's inhumane to do? How is it so easy to call somebody an outsider or call somebody a termite and think it is absolutely fine to do so? How is it okay for somebody to, attack a person for carrying beef or kill a person and video that and think they could display it on social media? And the fact that that is shared or that is liked, and even all these so-called educated people, the stuff that you exchange in WhatsApp, it's not about history, it's not about your belief system, it's about an exchange of hate. And I think this book comes from that. But there are two other things, right? Music or any art form is fundamentally a mode of symbolism. You are putting forward an art object, and the art object is not literally something, it's a representation or an abstract manifestation of something, it's an idea. And you're hoping that that idea, in a way, generates a certain kind of conversation, though you don't curate the conversation. That's what symbolism is all. And that's why I'm attracted towards symbols, whether it is a song, whether it is a sculpture, whether it's just a phrase. I'm interested in what does it trigger, where does it come from, what are the imaginations from it. And then I do write this book from the present, as you said, and I keep going back forth. I go to the past, I come to the present. In fact, I debated that for a long time. Should I do that? Is it too messy to write in that manner, for example? But I realized that I'm writing it as a citizen. Unless I do that flip, I am not writing it as a historian. I want to talk about that from where I see today. I see some losses. I want to recognize the losses. I see some unnecessary linearity in understanding history. I'm saying, no, it's messy. It came from multiple states. The same symbol had different meanings in different years, different communities. So I keep doing this flip fundamentally because, like you suggest, it comes from the present. And if I don't keep connecting it to my present, I don't have. It's a kind of a dialogue for me with the past. And I think that's how this book really happened.
That reminds me, when I first put up a picture of the book and said that we were doing this event, people on Instagram send messages, right, in your DMs. And one from somebody, I don't remember who, I don't know the person, said that, his music is great, but he's too much of an activist. And as I was reading this, that kept ringing in my head, it says too much of an activist. I was like, actually, is he too much of an activist, or is he just actively explaining his point of view as you just said, as a citizen, where these symbols aren't just museumized pieces of design that you keep in a glass box. Yeah. It is something that you're essentially saying needs to be reanimated constantly. And it is, what's interesting is that, what's interesting about you writing the book is often these symbols, you begin, for example, with the flag, the lions, all of these have often, at least over the last few years, at least in my living memory, been hijacked largely by the right wing. Yep. It is they who are obsessed with the flag, it is they who are obsessed with the symbols, whereas often people who are not on the right are seen to be obsessed with the granular details of life and poverty and this and that. Symbols are not something that activists, take up.
I know exactly what you mean.
Exactly. So that's what I was wondering, on the one hand, they say you're an activist, but per se activists don't go after symbols. So it's fascinating that you decided to venture into something like this.
I always describe myself as a musician, as a singer, because I think my activism, if you want to call that, it comes from music. It comes from being able to sing. It comes from being able to, most importantly, and I keep saying this, the most important thing in learning music is not singing, it's listening. And it's the toughest thing to teach in a classroom. How do I teach this? And I give this example many times, but I'll give it here because I think it's important for the book. So this actually happened in a classroom, teaching a student. And I was singing a line, students repeating a line. Once, twice, third time, fourth time, 15, 16, 17, 18. Student doesn't get the line. And I don't know what to do, and I'm much younger, so I had a shorter temper than I do now. I'm almost losing it. I'm screaming and saying, what the bloody hell, how much am I going to bang your head? Then something clicked. I realized what was going on. So the moment I started singing the beginning of the line, the student is already singing in their head. So whose voice is the student listening to? Isn't that fundamentally how conversations are happening today? You start saying something, the other person has already said it. So are they listening to you or are they listening to themselves? So I write as a musician because I think music has taught me to listen. And my worldview comes from listening. So if you want to call it activisty, fine, call it activisty. And I also don't understand why activism is taken to be some kind of bad word or some kind of a profile. Right? I think every citizen has to be an activist. I mean, the fact that our constitution says we are sovereign, by sovereignty we are saying it's sovereignty is with every citizen. Now, what does sovereignty mean? It means you actively engage in this country. You actively engage in everyday happening. Not that your active engagement is that one day when you go and put your vote and come back home. So every citizen, in my opinion, must be on the streets, must be asking questions, must be an activist. So I think we've got it all wrong. We made like some profile of a job profile to be an activist. I think it's our fault. And I think that the liberal world is a big problem. We think we are the only ones who have the right to be an activist. That's a big problem. And that comes out in the tonality, comes out. And the other thing, if you don't tick all the activisty boxes, then you're not activisty enough. So then you can't talk to each other. Then you say, I'm okay with your position on caste, but gender, boss, I can't talk to you. If you do this, you don't have to agree on everything. You don't all have to say one thing. But even if you're going to categorize what it means to be an activist, you are alienating even people who are, if I can within the courts, who are at least fairly on your side of belief there's a democratic setup where we can have free conversation. And I think that is a certain amount of snoot that the liberal world constantly exudes a bit too much. And that also needs to be said.
On the symbols, but you didn't answer that bit where I asked whether this is an active reclaiming of symbols.
Okay,
because,
yes.
for example, this is an age where Ambedkar statues are painted of saffron.
Oh, yes.
So symbols are always being sort of reinterpreted by one side. But are you actively reclaiming? Is that also part of the...
That's very important. I'm sorry I missed that part. It's important. Yes, absolutely yes. Another big failure is us allowing so many things to go. Even words. Like I say in this book, I didn't use the word spiritual for a long time. I was very uncomfortable with it. It bothered me. It's like, and I had 100 explanations for it, which I know by heart by now. But in this book, I used the word because I want to reclaim that word. So I feel that I really think we need to reclaim these symbols and reclaim them with our eyes fully open, reclaim them with the messiness there is and there has been around them. But if you're not going to, see, we forget that our entire life is a life of symbolism. If you think of your day from morning to night, many things you do is not because of literal reasons. It's because of some symbolic imagery. It is simple things that happen. So we've actually not realized how powerful symbols are, and which is why we let them go. We have to reclaim them. We have to reinterpret them. We have to reimagine them. We must allow for debate. And within the symbols are larger questions and larger debates that you can build around these symbols, right? So I think this book is reclaiming the symbols, reclaiming what I think is the idea of India, my belief of what India is, and it is a reclaiming of vocabulary. And we forget that we've also given up language, and we have to reclaim this. And if it is contested, so be it, but reclaim it.
There's also, you said that it's about reclaiming language and so on, but there's also a sense of, you said you use the word spiritual, for instance. But every time I read, I also thought there's a moral clarity, which in today's world is also interesting because we are increasing, at least those of us who deal with history, we're often told to be so even-handed that you can't take positions of any kind. Whereas you don't hesitate when it comes to having that moral clarity because you're engaging as a citizen. Does that come to you naturally, or is this again a conscious choice that I am going to center my morality on a sense of values?
I don't think
in
it's
this?
a conscious choice. I think it's something to do with how I have been, and I think it's also got to do with the work that I continue to do beyond this book or before this book. And I think that has given me a certain set of just fundamental principles that I think that they need to be centered. And luckily, I'm not a historian. That's the greatest advantage in writing this book. Because in every interview, I keep saying, I am not a historian. I make it a point to say it. Because it's important, I think. Because I think you come from a different frame as a historian. And I think that's important. That is a different kind of clarity, actually, right? So even in this book, I give you many stories from different directions. But I want to say what I think is how we should draw from it. I do want to make that point. And I'm also willing to say that maybe 2 years later, I will look at it and say, no, maybe this is a different point. See, the other thing, consistency is the most overrated nonsense. If you're consistent, that means there's nothing happening in you. The fact is that everybody constantly renews how they think, they feel. You feel differently about everything differently every other day. So I think that that's important. It's possible that somebody else looks at this book and says, no, I'm going to take this, look at it this way. That conversation should happen. So I have great clarity in that framework that I have built. You call it an ethical framework of some sort. And I think in many ways I'm drawing only from what we have as our Indian constitution in that framework. I'm not drawing from something elsewhere. At the same time, I think another thing I do in this book, which I have not done before, is engage in the granular level with faith and religion. Again, something we refuse to do, which is why this book has Islam, it has Christianity, it has the Mundaka Upanishad, it has quotes from the Mahabharata. The fact is that that's where the musician in me helps, by the way. Because the musician in me is always engaging with all this. Even before I even started thinking, I've been singing about all the gods and goddesses you can imagine. I probably know Rama better than half the people in this room. Or more importantly, people beyond this room. But anyway, get that kept aside. But the fact is that this book allowed me to do that, which I never did before. It allowed me to say, how does one look at this thing? How does one look at what is in the Quran? How does one recapture it? And with a certain ethical framework that you build for recapturing it or reimagining it. Yes, I don't think it was a conscious book choice. Maybe it is where I feel I am in some manner. I just turned 50. I don't know if that's good or bad.
Although you said that you're not a historian, etc., there is a lot for historians to chew on in the book. Some of it is also the way you get us to think differently about things we take for granted. For example, you point out somewhere in the book that we use the word tiranga so freely, but it's actually a chaturanga. We've forgotten that there's a fourth color in it, which is the blue of the chakram. And that's right. I sat up and I was thinking, I never actually noticed the blue. And then what's interesting, which some might call mischievous, is that you interpret the blue.
Yes, I do.
As well, because nobody else has bothered to interpret that blue in it. There are all kinds of other colors, there's all kinds of theories. But with the blue, nobody's bothered to do it. And you're like, I'm going to go and give it my interpretation of what I see when I look at the blue.
So that's an interesting discovery, actually. So most people forget we have a chaturanga. We don't have a tiranga. We should start calling it a chaturanga. We have a beautiful blue right at the center, which is, of course, our chakra. So one of the things when I wrote that chapter is I was like, how do I approach these colors? That's the one thing that should I approach it through colors or through history? And I use colors as an entry point to create kind of philosophical conversations. So what do these colors trigger in me? What are our societal imageries of this trigger? And I went to the blue and I got a little stuck. Honestly, I was like, okay, where do I go with this? With the saffron, with the green, with the white, there is some clarity on, modes. Because we also have association, sacrifice and all that, right? So I got a little stuck with it. And then I just realized that Champaran was Gandhi's first big public action. And where was it? It was indigo farmers. I said, okay, that's interesting. So I started investigating Champaran. I said, okay. Then I realized that was not the first time indigo was part of struggle. It was even before in Bengal. Then I looked at that and I said, okay, there's some continuity. But then how do I jump from there to, say, the chakra? And of course, I remember this from my previous book, that this blue in all the mridangam makers, many of the mridangam makers' house used to be painted blue. So I remember thinking about blue and Dalit activism and all that. I said, okay, but then and it's an interesting combination of Gandhi blue and then Ambedkar blue. I thought that's itself fascinating for me. Maybe a little mischievous, but it was fascinating. But I was like, okay, this is blue. What's going on here? And then I looked for meaning for why blue. Nobody knew why blue was the color of most Dalit flags. Nobody knew. And I was looking through the collected works of Ambedkar. And I kept searching. And then I realized that he first chose blue as the flag in his first political action. I said, okay, but why blue? And actually nobody knows why blue. This is truth. So then I was reading Riddles of Hinduism, which is one of his last publications. And I actually was doing word search on the PDF with blue. And I kept going blue. And then I suddenly saw this quote from Harivamsha. And I looked at it and said, the quote is an interesting quote. And he was using Muir's translation, where every caste is associated with a color. Okay? And there is also a quote from Mahabharata in that same section, and that section is about origins of caste, is what he's trying to investigate. Where did the Varnas come from? Where the darker color was associated always with the Shudra. And then I was not happy with only Muir's translation. So then I wrote to Patrick, I wrote to Naresh Kirti. I must thank all these people and said, can you help me out? Let's untangle this for me. And then I read other scholars and how colors and social discrimination have always been attached to each other, even medieval period in Europe and other places. Then it struck me, because he has engaged with this text and I wonder in the book, whether the blue came from the fact that the Shudras were associated with the color black or blue. And in this dark black and blue are kind of, you can overlap the two. So I just propose and I say, maybe, just maybe, that was the reimagination that was happening. And he said, that's why blue becomes, and today blue is the color of Dalit activism. And maybe it's because in text, blue and dark and black would associate with Shudra. So I tried doing that.
You alluded to the fact that there's no clarity as to why the blue was chosen, and there's actually several points in the book where you discover that these emblems and symbols that we take so much for granted today, there are actually details that nobody knows how they emerged or where they came from. But anyway, just to go sequentially, since you've been talking about the flag, I found that chapter right at the start very fascinating. I didn't know there was a man called Venkaiah who came out with all these multiple designs. And you have a line somewhere where you say, we do not know how to be Indian without reference to religion. Because these people, the early nationalists, when they had to create a national flag, they thought of it as, okay, there are XYZ communities in India, let's make sure everybody's represented on the map. The result was this very khichdi-like set of designs where you have to throw in everything because everybody demands that they should also be represented.
I'm glad you used the word khichdi and not me, but go ahead.
Sorry. I'm not an anti-national, everybody, I'm pointing at him. But So that those were the designs coming up. Ultimately, it was a simpler version. But even there, the Sikhs were not happy that they felt they didn't have a
Their
color.
Color was not there. They complained to Gandhi. Yeah.
So run us through this whole process of the flag ultimately getting. And Gandhi wasn't happy himself about his charkha being removed.
No, he was very upset. So first of all, Gandhi didn't think a flag was important for a long time. It was not part of his political imagination at all. This Pingali, Venkaiah Pingali, is the most interesting character. He's from Andhra Pradesh and he starts thinking about the flag thanks to Sister Nivedita, who publishes an article, I think it's 1909, memory is right, in Modern Review, where she says the Vajra, and those who know Vajra, it is the weapon, Indra's weapon, and there's a mythology to it that one rishi used the bones of his body to create the super weapon, and she felt it was an exemplary example of sacrifice, and that should be the flag of India, one Vajra or two Vajras on saffron probably behind. He was fascinated by that article, and then he starts designing. Goodness gracious, his designs, I'll tell you. He published a book, and there is an entire sheet with about 30 designs, 28 are his. And like you said, he says in that the only way Indians can recognize themselves is through religion. Imagine he's saying this. By the way, he's just an ordinary everyday person. He's not some academic thinking of history. And he says, what do I do now? So he looks at the percentage of population of every religion. And he says, in the flag, according to population percentage, we will allow space. So Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Parsis are like one little pink this small. And of course, Buddhists, Jains, Parsis. So imagine divisions. They could be circle, they could be horizontal. And then what do you do for symbolism? There's Kali, I think there is even Abhimanyu somewhere, then there is a plow somewhere. Completely bizarre, okay? But that observation I thought was fascinating. He says Indians can only identify themselves through religion. Now he also says language is another way, interestingly, and he says maybe language is the other way we can divide ourselves. Now, Gandhi, after Gandhi meets Pingali, everybody says Pingali is the man who created the prototype. I refute it in the book because Gandhi himself says multiple times, I invented this flag. I created this flag. He says it over 15 years. And his only resource, so I would trust him and say it is his imagination. He gets a charka from a friend called Hansraj who says that's a great idea. It's only around 1919 when Gandhi comes up with saying, okay, we need a flag, and that's a very cardinal time during our freedom struggle. So he does this flag, and for 10 years he is talking about this flag only on religious basis. Gandhi himself constantly saying, this is for Hindus, this is Muslims, this is all that. The order is different, it's red and it's not saffron. Only 10 years later, 1929, he starts changing his interpretation. It also recognizes how people realize times have changed. You need a different discourse. We are probably slightly closer to independence, and there's friction between communities, and he said, this doesn't work. Right? He says, and the Sikhs are now at that point angry that they're saying, what is our color? We don't have a color. So then he says, no, this is sacrifice, this is peace, this is, all these things. So he loosens that discussion. The more interesting thing for me was there were multiple flags happening in multiple places. In Kolkata in 1906, you have the Kolkata flag. 1907, you have Kama unveiling a flag in Sutkard. Then you have the Hindu Mahasabha having their own flag. Then you have the home rule flag, which was by the discovery here. Every public domain will tell you there's one home rule flag, and I tell you in this book there are two. Annie Besant's home rule flag was different. Tilak's home rule flag was different. Interestingly, Tilak had a certain Saptarishi Hindu iconography to some extent. Annie Besant just had a red and a green. All this is happening parallelly. I think there's something to learn. The multiplicity of flags that could coexist at the same time is itself, I think, quite beautiful to think of it. They were not competing in that sense. They were all looking at freedom, but different notions of India. They came from different places. They disagreed. The Congress was going through its own turmoil at that point, between 1906, 7, all that period. So there are so many things. So for me, this whole coexistence and this non-linearity. Then 1931, this is one I have not cracked yet. I don't know why. 1931, they decide they need to create a flag. The Congress puts a committee together, and guess what they do? They choose a flag in saffron color. A committee that has also Nehru on it. A saffron color flag with a charka. And luckily, the Congress working committee throws that out of the window immediately and says, we go back to old flag, more or less. So I still can't understand how they thought. They said this flag looks like the Bulgarian flag or something like that. But all this is happening, and then finally, like you said, 1947, July 22nd, our flag is presented in the Constituent Assembly by Nehru. Actually, anybody who has time, please go read the speeches that day. They are all very, very beautiful speeches to read. It also gives you the complexity. Gandhi is upset. Gandhi says, you've removed the charka. And charka is what represents non-violent action, the poor, so many other things, labor, many other things, and also a very cardinal part of independence struggle. And he's upset about it. And I think there's some cajoling that happens. And finally, the way Gandhi accepts his interest, he only considers a slightly aesthetic improvement. He says, it's a slight aesthetic improvement, I'll let it pass, it's okay, you can have it. And then he says, but also the fact that it has Ashoka's connection makes me happy. So I actually think you could not have had the charka, because there was a certain movement from the charka to the chakra which was important, which was a movement of a nation coming into being, and action changes at that point of time. So I think it was important that we actually moved forward. But Gandhi is also, even with his passion for the flag, he is finally, but I also think there's another thing, right? Gandhi is like the most powerful person. You had the Congress going against his wishes. Those tensions are interesting. Or Nehru's famous letter to Gandhi after the Madras 1927 session, when Nehru puts a resolution saying that we should have complete independence. He writes a really sharp letter to Gandhi, where he literally tears him to pieces and says, I'm bored of what you write and all nowadays. I prefer your public action far more. You know, we forget that these things have happened. They happen in public domain, that there were disagreements. So this multiplicity is what I think for me the flags really, really like brought forward.
You know, you mentioned tension, right? And that's again a running theme throughout the book. All of these emblems have this constant play of tension happening. And the bit where you said that you find it fascinating there were multiple flags and how amazing that is. You know, there were several points I was reading this book and I kept thinking, sedition. Someone's going to come after him for sedition each time I read, you know, certain sections of the book. But there is, you know, one of the endorsements of the book, while you were speaking, I was just thinking, it says, differing views as this book reveals are not anti-national, rather they've been integral to the making of the Indian nation state. And that's something that comes across throughout. But on the point of the flag, it's also interesting that the material itself, right? Should it be khadi? And then recently onwards, I think they've started allowing polyester. And you have a little bit about that as well, which is so interesting, right? It's not about material. Yeah. It's also about what that material represents, as a principle it codes, at what period, and who's speaking, all of that.
So, you know, that was, I spent a lot of time thinking about those arguments because, you know, the instinct is to say we lost khadi, for example. And by the way, khadi is something that Rajendra Prasad is upset about. When the flag is chosen, the Constituent Assembly orders some 5,000 flags which are not khadi. He gets upset. He writes to Nehru and saying, how can you order non-khadi flag? Cancel the order immediately. You have to get khadi flag. So the khadi was very operative, right? And till recently, till I think the 70th anniversary of independence, we were only making khadi. And by the way, it was made only in one place in Karnataka. Okay, that's where all the flags were made. Then it was changed that be polyester. Now, I was wondering how does one discuss this, right? So, of course, at one point, it I think represents the kind of India we probably want. We want a shiny, we want a kind of glittery India. Khadi probably represents some kind of archaic notion that has all these, you know, all the weave is not clean. There'll be places, there'll be knots. Just think of it. Isn't our social media like that? Think of our Instagram handles. What is the right angle to have my face? Everybody knows it. Everybody cracks it. And look at music. We send it through computers like constantly. Now live concerts go through actually a comp that is already ironing out all the flaws in my voice. So in a way as a society, we are becoming synthetic. So while we can say khadi, 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 we are becoming synthetic. So maybe at some level it represents what at least a section of a privileged society in India feels they should feel like. I mean, what is AI doing? It's doing exactly the same thing. So this was a debate I was having with myself. While my instinct is to critique the synthetic, and I agree at some level, I wonder whether there needs to be some reflection about it also. Am I synthetic? You know, is it somewhere I want to wear this kind of hand-woven, but every other action in mine is synthetic. So something to think about. And also, even if you think of material, and this is the other discussion that I was having in the book is, you know, at one time the privileged middle class and upper middle class gave up khadi. It was not fanciful to have khadi. You wanted the synthetic material. You wanted that was machine made. You wanted the dhotis that were made in a mill, not dhotis that were made in hand woven. Now you all gotten woke and suddenly you want to say, oh, I only buy I am organic material and all this. Now the rest of the society, which is on a different part of the aesthetic curve, if you want to call it a curve, that way it's problematic, but nevertheless, I'll think about it. But
don't worry, no one will cancel you.
I'll just think about myself. Okay, it's not as anti-national, so it's okay. So I'm saying that they are now celebrating, say, synthetic. They want to, you know, I've seen that the classic example when you go in Tamil Nadu, the very casual expression will be is why are all these women from non-privileged section of society hanging around in a night suit? You see that very often, right? In a synthetic material. No, I'm saying that's such a problematic observation to make. So then you wonder whether even this notion of khadi that we want to celebrate, where is it coming from? So I debate that. I leave it unanswered actually in the book. Debate that. So what am I trying to protect? What am I trying to regain? Do I need to think deeper about it? So maybe the principle is not the material, but it's something else. It's not whether it is khadi or whether it is polyester, but am I khadi or am I polyester? If there are metaphors of who I am, I think that's the deeper question.
It's also a case of symbols itself constantly being negotiated, right? There's a constant negotiation going on. And your second chapter is on the lion capital. And of course, a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, there was a big controversy when they were reimagined with the new parliament, etc. And now there are junctions in Lutyens, Delhi, where you see these lions sitting at traffic crossings, very aggressive lions, as opposed to the lions that existed earlier. And there's all kinds of explanations that have been trotted out. But again, you make a very interesting point there about, well, this is not just about this isn't just about the lions. It's also about the direction the country is taking. The symbol, as reimagined today, technically it's Ashoka's lions, but it is also not Ashoka's lions. It is something new.
It definitely is. I don't think this is unconscious happening. The lions are different. Let's first just accept it. These lions are not Ashokan lions. They are very far from it. And I think it represents what people in power today believe should be India, which is this hyper-masculine, maybe more inches on the chest than 56, and kind of always pouncing on people, and also, oppressive at some level. It's oppressive. It's not aggressive. It's oppressive. So, and you want this line to, make somebody scared. You want it to be fearful, and also, there's a lot of, we've like confused words. Now the word killer instinct is celebrated. I still can't understand that. And I use that cricket analogy. I remember the times when I was watching cricket in the 80s and 90s. Indians don't have the killer instinct. Now the new Indian. So, what is the killer instinct? If I am successful, I have the killer instinct. If I'm not successful, I don't have the killer instinct. And is confidence the same as killer instinct? Is being able to do your work with your full of your ability? Is that? No, it's not. So we're confusing confidence. We're confusing words like weakness to being just a quiet doer in some manner. And these lions represent an aggressive, on your face, pouncing, cutting off your head kind of aggression. And we seem to want it. And I say we, I mean establishment, seems to want it. So to say that this is the same as Ashokan lion is just a lie. It is not. Somebody actually told me, I think some clip of an interview came out, boss, how can the lions ever be compassionate? It was actually a comment. I know it was supposed to be snarky, but I thought it was a fascinating thing. Think about it. Can the lion, and I actually thought about it, that's interesting. Can the lion be compassionate? So the lions on the Ashokan Pillai, if you look at the mythology and if you look at Buddhism on that, they are actually supposed to be about kind and compassionate leadership. Those lions represent kind and compassionate leadership, looking at the 4 directions that they are governing. In some ideas, they are also supposed to represent the Buddha himself, right? So lions can be compassionate. And I said, lions were not new to India. The colonial powers had lions. The British had lions in their symbolism. The East India Company had lions. So are those lions different from this lion? I think they are. And today we have changed them again because we want this kind of a lion. And I think that's the tone you hear in the public discourse today. The tone is exactly that, right? So Ashoka is considered some kind of a weakling who we should not be celebrating, And I think this is a very gendered argument too.
On the lions itself, it's interesting. You have all this interesting minutiae in the book about when it was decided as the emblem, the exact design, the size of the design. 25 years later, the central government is still writing to states saying, please phase out your old logos and your emblems. We need the new emblem to be used, etc. But even the choosing of Ashoka's line itself, I think you make the point somewhere that, like with the flag, everybody thought initially they needed representation somewhere on some corner of the flag. There was the fear of the possibility that we would have had to invent some kind of national symbol. Yeah. And somehow Ashoka appealed to everybody. Everybody decided, okay, this is about everybody, so we're happy to live with Ashoka.
So yeah, I think Ashoka was a very smart move. It was a move because communal tensions were high. You wanted to make sure that you don't fall into any kind of a Hindu, Muslim religious trap. So, and of course, I think Nehru was greatly invested in Ashoka. I suggest in the book that maybe he somewhere saw himself as a modern Ashoka. I think he did. And he was very invested. But there is also this idea that Ashoka was kind of convenient for everybody. So Buddha could be one avatar of Vishnu. So if you are a Hindu nationalist, you could find a reason for Ashoka making sense there. So everybody kind of felt comfortable with what you would call neutral source. Right? And they found their own, then you'll find that in the discourses, they found their own meaning for it through it. And they were comfortable with Ashoka, not threatening any identity. So I think that was very, very interesting. And I think there was, if I remember right from the book, some Constituent Assembly member, I bet it's not discussed much in the Constituent Assembly at all. the emblem, I think someone says that he gives an explanation. He says the only time that this land was possibly violent was when it was violent towards the Buddhists, and maybe choosing Ashoka was a way of penance towards that, or something to that effect. And I thought that's very interesting kind of explanation that somebody is giving to it. So Ashoka, I think, kind of allowed for many things to pass at the same time and not get into conflict, and which is why it sat perfectly with everybody. And to the granular part of how I was wondering, should I say, because I was like, my first question, actually I called lawyers all over. Can you tell me how the emblem was adopted? Can you tell me how the motto was adopted? Nobody knew. It's not the Constituent Assembly. When did you adopt? I know that the flag was adopted in 1947. We know that Jana Gana Mana was announced as the national anthem. This too we know. Preamble, of course, we know in November 1949 it was adopted. How was the emblem adopted? Nobody knew. I filed RT application. The application did not help me very much because they quoted a 1972 letter which referred to a 1953 letter. Those two letters don't tell you anything. So I actually found it in a file in the archives, in the National Archives, where you realize that this went through huge discussions. And imagine the Home Ministry and the Prime Minister's office arguing about the lions, whether they are close to Sarnath lion. And I felt these things have to be told, just the investment. So what actually happens, to tell you a brief story, 1949, December, I'm bad at dates, he's the historian, get the dates right in the book. The Ashoka Ashoka emblem, Sarnath pillar is accepted as the emblem. It's first week of January, what happens is that the media misrepresents it and they put the Ashoka emblem and put a square around it. Nehru in a cabinet meeting is pissed about it. And he makes imagine a prime minister saying this. He's saying there is error in newspapers, there's no square around the Ashokan emblem. It's also unaesthetic because you can't have a square around a circular emblem. Can you imagine any prime minister having the sensibility to even say this? And to record it. I'm an artist, okay? These things give me goosebumps. I know it may seem like a trivial thing, but for me it's like, wow, man, I love this guy. He's imagining, right? It's imagination. It's not just like, kuch to karo yaar, square ho sakta hai, rectangle hai, kuch karo. Red color, blue color, do what? No! He's like then fighting about which color. So for the stamp, what it should be. And then what happens? Anyway, they decide to print it and blah, 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 all that happens. Then, at some point in the middle of the year, they decide also the motto.
Satyameva Jayate.
Satyameva Jayate. Okay? Then there's a letter from Prime Minister's office to Home Office saying that the new designs you sent us are not the same designs that we approved in 1949 December. These designs are different. So then the answer from the Home Ministry is the best. The answer from the Home Ministry says this. And they were right, by the way. It was different. The 49 lions were kind of shabby, okay, truthfully. There was a lot of hair on the leg, and it was the pen work was really bad. Who did a bad job? The Home Ministry basically said the one you approved in 49 actually is a bad representation of the Sarnath pillar. Therefore, we are not using that. We have redone what we have done now is a better representation of the Sarnath pillar, and sends a letter back to the Prime Minister's office. To imagine that this was being even discussed. And back and forth, and then one letter, and there is of course, with bureaucracy, there is 5 people have to sign every letter, right? And all the 5 people are adding their own little okays to it. But for me, it was fascinating about the investment that, they realized that they were creating something unusual. And they felt they just want to get it all right, just get it right. So it's this whole thing about how the line should look, how should it look in a stamp, how should it look in a letterhead. There are samples of letterheads across that file, by the way. And then best part is by then they realized that every mission office, that is basically all the embassies, were doing what they wanted. Anything they want. Like, what is the hell is going on here? So there's also a question of homogeneity there, right? The consistency. And that's something that comes from even Gandhi's time. Gandhi actually says the cheapest way to print the flag is through khadi. But there must be consistency. So the notion of then comes of what is the notion of bureaucratic consistency? What does that do to imagination? So that's also an interesting thing to explore when all these discussions are happening.
Even on the motto, wasn't there someone who argued that it shouldn't be Satyameva Jayate, it should be Jayati, and there's a whole grammatical thing going on about is it Jayate, is it Jayati, which is accurate, and then someone says actually later rules of grammar, as per which it should be Jayati, don't apply to this because it comes from the Upanishads, which are from an earlier phase of Sanskrit. And it's fascinating, as you said, that a nation is being birthed, a world war has ended, British have left, partition is happening, and in the middle of all this, these are also the debates that are happening.
So Satyameva Jayate had least information for me. I could find no information anywhere, absolutely anywhere.
Including who came up with choosing
Even
that.
now, it is only something that I presume, based on information I have, I think C. Rajagopalachari or Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan had a role to play. Most people think Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan because he wrote the book on the Upanishads. This is from the Mundaka Upanishad. But I think Rajagopalachari also had a role in this. That's all I can say, beyond which I really don't know. Okay, this is very interesting. Satyameva Jayate is announced May 29th or 30th. The letter sent to all departments saying Satyameva Jayate will be the motto of India. Within 15 days, I have to say, people in the south of the Vindhyas, I'll tell you, especially privileged fellows, have no job in their life. There's an entire file, I'm not kidding. And the letters are 90% from either people from your state, my state, Andhra Pradesh, some Pandit or the other. You can't have Satyameva Jayate, it's grammatically wrong. Prime Minister office panics, puts out a lightning telegram to every department, stop announcement. So imagine, it's almost hilarious at one point, right? Stop immediately, we have to find out what's going on. Now, there is a problem. The problem is, I'm not going to go to Sanskrit grammar because it's got to do with, it's complicated, it's in the book, but you can go through that. So the actual line is Satyameva Jayate Nanritam, meaning not lies, okay, simply put. Now, the problem lies, of course, then one of the arguments is, no, in Vedic grammar, or rather in Upanishadic grammar, this is permissible. You don't have to follow other later grammar to make this point. Jayate is fine. Now the argument is it should be Jayati. Now this goes back and forth, but there's something fascinating that emerged from this investigation for me. So what happens finally, Nehru asks a few people, some scholars write to him, I try to say who the scholars are, and then he comes to the conclusion, no change is required, it's going to be as it is. Now the interesting thing is this Jayate and Jayati. There's something called an Atmane Pada and a Parasmai Pada in Sanskrit. Okay, that is what is the subject and action, right? Now when we say Satyameva Jayate, we say truth is victorious. Okay, now truth is an abstract idea. Can truth be victorious? If you think of it that way. Actually no. Now the Mundaka Upanishad, so who is the subject? If you say truth is a subject, in this construction truth is a subject, right? But if you just think about it, just pause for a moment. Truth can't be victorious. It's not action, it's not anything. Now the Mundaka Upanishad is an Upanishad supposed to be mainly for medicants and rishis. Now, if you change the subject to be the rishi, then the one who speaks the truth becomes victorious. Then it is Satyameva Jayate and not Jayati. And that's how the line should be understood. I think it's very valuable for us to think of it that way. The person who speaks the truth, and of course in the Upanishad truth has many other meanings, but keep that aside. The person who speaks the truth is victorious. And this is thanks to Patrick and all these scholars that I was able to kind of unearth it. And I quote also somewhere there from the Kamba Ramayana, and there's a beautiful line which I fell in love with, which I saw on Twitter. Interestingly.
Some gains from Twitter.
Yes, saw it on Twitter, I must tell you. And so while describing Kosala, the land of Rama, so he says, in a land where I'm paraphrasing, in a land where there are no lies, there is no truth. It's such a brilliant line. In a land where there is no lies, there is no truth. That the very fact that the existence of truth happens because there's a land of lies. So if you and to me, Satyameva Jayate spoke to that. Right? So I kind of play with that a little bit. That's because I'm a citizen, not a historian.
You at one point also have this line where you ask the question, are fact and truth synonymous? And I thought that was also a very solid question because That's such an interesting question. There is no simple answer to that. Are fact and truth synonymous?
And I think as a historian, you also kind of grapple with that,
Yeah,
right? An
yeah.
event is a fact, but where does the truth come from?
But based on what you just said earlier, on the Constitution itself, right? You said that truth only exists because there are lies. Similarly, with the Constitution itself, you make the point, and I think you're also sort of grappling with that. You have this dialogue with Gopal Krishna Gandhi that you do relate in the book. And it's interesting that on the one hand, it feels like, okay, constitutions, all these abstract ideas. In reality, how much has changed? Have we really lived up to all its promise, etc.? And yet the existence of the promise itself can be empowering, it can be protective, it can give people agency. Just the fact that it's there as an ideal, even if we haven't actually achieved most of it. That whole, tell us something about this whole principle of the Constitution itself and how you view it as this very empowering force, but also with its,
Yeah, I think the problem is how if you think of it, none of us really have a relationship with the Constitution, very, very honestly speaking. That's because we've always considered it to be something that's happening in some legal domain, in a language we don't understand. And it's only for lawyers, it's only for cases. If you think of Constitution, you think of a court. That's the first image that comes in your head, right? A court of law or Supreme Court. So I think we need to have almost a visceral relationship with the Constitution. And yes, I think the thing about the Constitution is that it is, imagine a time when, think of India in 1950. Just put us in that context. And you have this document that is dreaming of things that seem so far ahead, that have said things that seem almost like this country, that? Are you serious? But that's the beauty of it. So it offers you an imagination. Maybe not the perfect imagination, but offers you an imagination. And it then says, can we all imagine? Now, that's what the Constitution is doing. But we need to all start imagining. The problem is we failed there. We failed in passing on the ideas within it in a classroom, in schools, with children, with all of us, right? We have that stupid civics textbook with those 4 pages and that preamble we have to read. I'll come to the Gopal Krishna Gandhi discussion there. But I'm saying that I think it offers that imagination of a far more humane, ethical, equal society where justice is there. It is not perfect and we may not even get right there, but can we move in that direction? Can we, and more than move, I'll go back to the fact that I'm a musician. Can we feel that way? I always think change can happen only in feeling and not in intellectual acceptance. So how does one feel? How can I really feel in a manner that respect is what I see? I'm not offering anybody sympathy, or I'm not doing it because it's the right thing to do, or I'm not being condescending. Can I really feel equal? That's a very tough thing to do, especially of privilege. It's very difficult to feel equal. So I think that the Constitution in many ways, and especially that fundamental rights section, my goodness, it's just spectacular, to think of the stuff we have in it. I don't agree. I mean, I even critique that, but despite that, I think it is. And of course, it's not a perfect document. Let's be very clear. But you know what's great about it? It has enough leeway to grow. This is why our Constitution is special. Because right to life, for example, has allowed for so many things to come into it through reimagining it in a different new context. Like the environment is never mentioned in our fundamental rights, right? Now, environment and the right to environment comes through right to life. I mean, that's privacy. And I think we underestimate that. The entire idea of dignity that's there in the preamble is captured in that word privacy, which we have got it through to this way, right? Right to life. So that is what makes the Constitution really, really ennobling in many ways. And I think it's important. And to that whole discussion, Mr. Gopal Gandhi, and even as a symbol, and I think that was an important back and forth where I disagreed with him. So he narrates a story to me. And the story is when he was governor of West Bengal. He goes to this little village. He meets this, it's a very, very poor neighborhood. There is this young girl in that hut. And of course, she's not gone to school because she's been told the governor is coming, blah, blah. He goes into the hut and he speaks to her. And then he sees one little box over there, and trunk case kind of thing. So he asks her whether you'll read something. She says, yeah, I will. She opens the trunk and she doesn't read. She just takes something out, but without looking at it, recites the entire preamble. And Gopal Gandhi is absolutely stunned. And he said that the fact that she knew it means something. And I pushed back. And I said, the fact that she's reading this but living in that environment and hut, how do you think that's justified? He didn't let go. He pushed back. And he said, imagine what her mother's life would have been. And maybe then, when she grows up, her life will change. Maybe the words, or if you believe in the power of sound, maybe the sound in some way will transfer itself into action in some manner, and her life or her daughter's life will change. Now, you have to believe at some level, the hope comes from there. It's maybe not the most practical way sometimes to think, but you have to believe that this fact that somebody knows it, next will probably understand it, next will probably say, why am I not having this right? I hope it doesn't take 3 generations, but I think that that's also something we should allow for, that possibility, as utopian as it sounds. I don't want to shut it, but in the book I do keep pushing back on Mr. Gandhi, and I say I don't agree with you.
In fact, I was just thinking, you also have a lot of criticism of Mahatma Gandhi, especially on caste, etc. And of course, Gopal Gandhi is his grandson, and this book is also dedicated to Gopal Gandhi. So I found all of that very interesting.
I don't know whether these are the chapters yet, but go ahead.
Now, we don't have much time, so I'll get to the bit that you've been getting trolled on, which is the national anthem and the national song. Vande Mataram and Jana Gana Mana, of course. Fascinating chapter. To me, I think that and the flag chapters, these were like bookending at 2 ends of the book.
Yeah.
They were really very, very solid chapters. And I thought that, is so interesting that firstly, Vande Mataram didn't emerge in one flow. It was constructed piecemeal over different times. And you talk about how musically, as a composition, it doesn't really work. It's actually it's got flaws. It can't be glorified from that perspective. It also has a direct link to a certain perspective and a certain view of nationalism. Jana Gana Mana, on the other hand, has a slightly different history. It was chosen for a certain reason, including by Nehru, etc., who thought that this is way better because the other one has communal interpretations, etc. Run us through these 2 compositions.
Okay, I'm just going to go pretty fast because they're long stories. Vande Mataram, it's like, is it one song? Is something even I'm thinking now. Is it many songs put into one? Vande Mataram has different locations at different period of time, means different things at different periods of time. So Vande Mataram, the first 2 verses, was written somewhere between 1872 and 1875. That's the period. Now, after that, Bankim does not do anything. There are interesting narrations about it, which are there in the book. When he publishes in, let's say 1872 to 1875, and 1881 is when Andhamat, his novel, is published. Somewhere between 75 and 81, he adds 2 more verses to the song. Now, that is 4 verses of Vande Mataram, the song. I'll come to Andhamat. Now, one thing I knew historians could not do and I can do is analyze form. No historian knows how to analyze song form. Lucky for me.
So, and there's several pages of that, by the way, in that chapter.
I was making a point, right? Obviously, you guys can't do it, man. So, for me, it was fascinating to say, because I'll tell you why. We often forget what form does to meaning and intent, or intent does to form and meaning, both ways, okay? So, the first verse is, I actually love the first verse of Vande Mataram. Sujalam, Supalam, Maleja, Sheetalam, Shashya, Shamalam. And the word of Sha and Sa is naturally very, very soft. There's something extremely soft. Now, the second verse is, I think there's a shift even in the second verse, though they were published, they were composed together. In the second verse, suddenly, Bankim is getting very, very tactile and temporal. Suddenly, he's talking about the population of the country. How many Bengalis here? Okay, and Bengalis seem to think Bengal is a population of the country. So, Bankim's understanding of population of India then was the population of Bengal as published by the British, which is why it's Sapta Koti. Okay? Suddenly he's saying Sapta Koti Kanta Kanta. He's saying that there are 7 crore people are in great depression and sadness, and there is a resistance that comes in. Now, but he does one very intelligent thing there, is who's resisting? Is it the idea of India resisting, or are the people resisting? It allows you to kind of play around with that notion of where's the resistance coming. I think that's quite smartly done, right? Even then, I have listened to dozens of tunes of all 4 verses when they are sung together. The second verse itself, kind of musically and form, is collapsing. Now, for a song, you need some sets of consistencies. It is consistency within word, between words, within lines, between lines, also in linguistic form. There is flow that happens, and you would find that in any song. Now, in the third and fourth verse, something has happened. So there, she is definitely Durga. Okay, she's become Durga. I think the second verse allowed for it, and there's a huge shift in language, and the language shift is also sound. Okay, and I'm a non-Bengali who still identify these things. That the sound changes, which means meter changes, which means that it is not falling into rhythmic structures. So when you hear any tune of Vande Mataram, which has all four verses together, those versions, you always find after a point that the song in form, talking about form now, okay, is not holding itself together, and all composers of tunes have had to do some adjustments. You can play anything for me, I'll show you the adjustments. One word will have to be adjusted somewhere. There's a spillover which should not be there. So there is a struggle for it to remain together. Maybe that itself tells you something about meaning. That there is a struggle there. There is something going on there. And I think we forget about seeing poetry in this manner, because sometimes form itself tells you that there is some issue over there. Now the fact is, this song was part of the book Anthem. Now Tagore loves this song. The first verse. Tagore sang only the first verse. I keep urging all my audiences to go on YouTube and listen to Tagore sing it. It's not trained voice, but there's something magical about the way Tagore sings it. Okay? And he sings the first verse, he's tuned the first verse, and the initial reaction when the controversy erupts in the 30s is, it's accidental role in the novel. I completely disagree with this expression, accidental role. In Anandamat, this song is a very important cog. It's an aesthetic cog, it's also a narrative cog. Now, Anandamat itself, some scholars tell you it's actually only anti-Mir Jafar and colonial powers, and it is not anti-Muslim. Please read the text. Please go read Anandamat cover to cover. Please read it. The sannyasins are attacking Muslim villages. The sannyasins are attacking everyday Muslims. This is the story in Anandamat.
And this is their song.
And this is a song that they sing. It's also kind of I think I remember it's an initiation kind of a song too. And this song is a very important role in that narrative. So you have to accept that it has a role there. To say no, it's just wrong to do that. Okay. So therefore it's problematic. And that tension is understandable. We have to accept these things. So now all this is true. It's also true that in 1905, 1906, when the partition of Bengal happened, the same Vande Mataram played a different role. The Vande Mataram becomes an anti-colonial call. It's a time when the British said you can't even say those words on the streets. Satsangs that had that song sung were stopped. So now how do you reconcile? Don't have to reconcile it. This is also true. This is also true. The tension, both tensions are true, right? So there is this struggle with this song. So idea is, and very interesting thing, if you look at today, often those who say Vande Mataram must be there, and even today, you just see the other narratives that often get attached to it. The other narratives are Sanskritized narratives. Other narratives are about, say, in a way of saying there must be anti-conversion law, or there should be a uniform civil code where uniform means one thing, if I can qualify that. And so if you see, or kind of a Islamophobia, all this, or people, for example, when they walk across mosques, they show their janda and they're sounding Vande Mataram. Now Vande Mataram has become almost an attack on somebody. No, you cannot just ignore these things that are put together.
Don't you also mention that in the Constituent Assembly debates, the people who wanted Vande Mataram as the anthem were also the ones who were
So
for
yeah,
cow
it's a very
protection
interesting thing, like the 3-4 arguments and few other things. National dress. That's also discussed, by the way. So some people say Vande Mataram, they want national dress. They want the fact that national dress is also mentioned in the constitution. National anthem, national dress, one language. So there is this very, very homogeneous kind of perception that is built around this narrative. All I'm saying is this is built around this narrative, and we can't run away from what is built there. Jana Gana Mana comes from an entirely different space. Right? Jana Gana Mana, first of all, it's not about King George. Please, we have to stop saying
that's the big controversy, that Tagore wrote it to welcome King.
I can't even believe how anybody can continue saying, I mean, before me, enough historians have written about it. I'm not the first person writing about it. But I still put it in, like I say, it has to be put down. So I keep calling it the protest song. So it reminds me of a Tyagaraja Kirtana. There's a Tyagaraja Kirtana, Niditsala Sukama, Ramuni Sanniditsala Sukama. Now the story behind this song, whether it's true or not, is a story that the king of Tanjavur wanted a song to be sung about him. Okay, sounds familiar? And goes to Tyagaraja. Tyagaraja basically says, and for money, he'll get money. He says, Niditsala Sukama, Ramuni Sanniditsala Sukama. What is Sukha for me? Is it money, wealth, recognition, or is it the Sannidhi of Rama? So he asks. Now, listen to the Tagore story. You will know why it's similar. Tagore is suddenly called by somebody close to the establishment. King George is coming to India in 1911 for the Darbar in Delhi, wanting him to compose a song in honor of King George. And in Tagore's own words, he is mighty pissed. He's like...
I mean, not the exact words, but yes.
Yeah, thanks.
I don't think we want Tagore saying pissed.
But actually, Tagore uses very colorful language. Far more sophisticated, of course. But anyway, Tagore says... So you can just imagine, and there is this imagination by other people also, that he went back to bed absolutely irritated, gets up early in the morning, and he comes up with what? Janagana Mana Adhinayaka. He's always making the point that bozo cannot be Adhinayaka. Adhinayaka is the eternal charioteer. Adhinayaka is the idea of a guide. You call him God, divine, I don't know. That's an adjective you can use. And he comes up with this song. And of course, the friend who wanted this song is not pleased. This song is not sung anywhere Judge George appeared, whether it's Delhi or in Kolkata. And other songs in praise of him are composed by other people. And what Tagore does is, same song is handed over to the Congress, the same month, 1911 December, to be presented at their annual conference. Now another set of crazy things happen where the confusion becomes more. It's like on the morning when Janagana Mana. See, please remember 1911, another very great thing happened, which is that the partition of Bengal was rescinded by the British government. So they are very thankful to King George. So also remember, we think freedom struggle was from beginning, we said, get out British. No, we did not. We first said, give us rights. We first said, give us equality. Then we said, no, give us some decision making on the table. Then we said, no, give us more representation. Then we want to be on the council. Through all this aggregation, finally we said we want independence. So Swaraj took different shapes and meanings. We have lost that. It's like from 1847 we wanted no, it's not as simple as that. It's more complicated. And within this there were people who said they have to get out now. There were others who said no, let's still work under them. Some said dominion is still fine. Right? So all this is happening. And therefore in Congress meetings many times hail the king is very normal. Celebrating the king is very normal. And they said that there are phrases by many figures saying that under the British flag Indians are flourishing. Constantly being said. So in that context, 1911, a song in Hindi in praise of King George is sung. Then after thanking the king, blah, 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 letters, everything, a second song is sung in Bangla, which is Janagana Mana Adhinayaka Jai. The Bengali newspaper gets it right, publishes the verses the next day. Now the Reuters and some of the British newspapers now got it wrong purposely, well, we never know. They confuse the song and they think that Janagana Mana is the song in honor of King George. This is where the second level of confusion happens.
Fake news.
Fake news. Yeah, that's true. Maybe I should use that. Next edition. That's going to be I will change that phrase. Good phrase. So that spreads. Now, obviously, I think Tagore knew. Because Tagore publishes it in January the next year immediately. And that's when Tagore keeps clarifying many times, saying there's no way this would be about George. What is wrong with you guys?
So all the way to the 30s, he's clarifying.
Because that's constantly coming back, right? And it's coming back now. So this song also has this interesting trajectory, right? Who is it about? When was it composed? So it's so fascinating, the two songs. And to me, I could see that you had to discuss the two songs together. There was no way I could say, I won't write about Vande Mataram. So this song comes up and then it is sung. And then when we want to choose national anthem, there is some symbolic fights. Hindustani classical musicians are all singing Vande Mataram. They're all tuning it. Okay, it's very interesting. They're all tuning it and sing it different ways. There are people who refuse to sing it in All India Radio until all the four verses. I think Omkarnath Thakur refuses to sing it. Because initially he sang all the four verses. The two verses are cut, he refuses to sing it. By the way, his version in Kafi is gorgeous. But it's really beautiful. there's all this battles are also going on. So I think that that is one of the reasons why, if you see in the Constituent Assembly, anthem is never discussed. Never discussed. It's just kept quiet. And finally, you just hear the president announcing it's an anthem. But then there's second confusion. They said we'll also have Vande Mataram respected, given equal respect or something. Now, what happens after this is almost really funny. They say, okay, we should do all this fine. India's a large country. They want to know how to spread the anthem. They're sending letters out. Education Ministry. Azad was then, I think, Education Minister to all. Nobody knows what song to sing. Many people don't know whether anthem is Janaganamana or Vande Mataram. And most people don't know the words. Then they say there is Punjab, Sindh. There's no Sindh in India. Partition has happened. Maybe we have to change it and add Assam and other parts. Other people are adding their own lines. No, this confusion is all over the country. And the Home Ministry is like, what do we do with this? And in Tamil Nadu, with Madras Presidency, then you also have Vande Mataram, you have Variya Sindamir who's being sung. So which should be sung first, which should be sung second? Who knows the lyrics? All the school teachers are writing to the government and saying, please send some proper version of this. We don't know the tune. You know, it was not so easy, by the way, to communicate even these emblems to a large, diverse population. It took work for almost 10 years. Like you said, even after 25 years, if you had colonial symbols. So even that's fascinating, that amount of effort that took part from the government's part to pass this on, to go through all these things was also fascinating. So these two songs, I think, represent two ideas of India in many ways. I think Janagana Mana, even if it had never been chosen national anthem, is one of Tagore's most beautiful compositions. And I've been saying this till now, wherever I speak about the song, and I'll say it again now, is I very sincerely believe we should have had the second verse as part of our anthem. Oho, oho, raho tobo, ahvano prochorito shunitobo, udaro bani. Hindu Bauddha Shikho Jaino Poroshiko Musalmano Hindustani. Why the hell is this not part of our anthem? And what baffles me a bit is partition happened. Violence everywhere. Why didn't anybody say we need to tell ourselves and every child say that we are a country of Hindus, Muslims, Parsis, Buddhists, China, everybody? If I would change something, I would add that verse to the anthem and make sure that every child in this country sings it.
We'll open up to audience questions. This is my final bit, where you have this segment towards the end of the book where you say that freedom is essentially gauged by the right to say no. And you, of course, contextualize that. But at a very personal level, are we free? How free are we? And are you an optimist?
The fact is that we are not as free as we think we are, whoever you are, right? I think the fact that there's self-censorship and we're all thinking at some point of time, should I say this? Should I use that word? Should I sing this song? The fact is that we're all thinking it. I'm thinking it. I know I am. And it really bothers me that I am. It's not about being safe. You're not doing it out of your own free will. You're doing it because there is fear. There is fear. Somewhere it lingers. May not be for yourself, but maybe for people around you, maybe for people who love you. There is that fear. It's like, you want this or not. Yet you push ahead and still do what you do. But the fact is that we're all kind of situationally gauging, right? And that you can't. So in a way, maybe at some point in time, you stop thinking certain things even. First, you stop the thought. And the thought doesn't appear. I think that kills one fundamental thing about the human species, which is to be creative. And that's what it does. It's not just about fear. We will become less and less creative as human beings because certain ideas will never appear in your head. Certain thoughts will never come. Certain designs won't come. Certain tunes won't come. Certain images won't come. Certain movements won't come. And I think that's where we are headed towards. And anybody who wants that from you wants a thoughtless, subservient society. I don't care about ideologies. This is the truth. And am I an optimist? It depends on the morning. Truthfully, it is. Truthfully, it is. There are some mornings are horrible. I mean, they're truly horrible. Some mornings I open my computer and I read the news and I see what's happening and it just churns. It's like, oh God. You almost want to run away. You have this feeling of wanting to run away, right? But where do you run? I mean, the world over seems to be quite a maybe Mars, maybe Elon Musk. I don't know. I don't want to go with that guy, but anyway. So, but seriously, and there are some mornings where something happens that say, okay, it was all worth it. Or you meet somebody who comes and just says, something to you, and it's like, yeah, it was worth it. It's one person, but I think the thing that I really want to tell young people is that, scale doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many people you talk to or what you do. We need many small things to happen. It could be just your family, it could be your friend, it could be one person. Can we engage? Can you engage there? Can you do something there? And if you have hundreds and thousands of that happening, I think the effect of that generationally, we underestimate generational effect. We want something to change tomorrow morning. I think that's far more. And so, irrespective of what government is in power, who's in power, we have to rediscover some basic humanity. And because the fact is, once this trick is learnt by everybody, nobody wants you to go there. Everybody will play the game. Let's be very honest. Everybody, they know where power holds. They know the more I partition you, it's easier for me. Everybody's going to play the game. For us to be able to resist that, we have to have small conversations. We need what we call today many safe spaces.
And that's why he ends the book with the preamble. It's almost like a reminder to the reader to sort of go back to the principles and the hope and the optimism and the idea of the Constitution as well. Audience questions? I'm assuming there's a mic that will go around. If people have questions, raise your hands.
I have an observation to make. In spite of being a photographer, I must say that the fight is one text against the other. Ultimately, all our fights boil down to your text against somebody's text. Talking about a lion, there is one text in which a lion is portrayed as the most compassionate. That's the only text you will find that the lion is compassionate. And the picture of that lion is there's a lamb that is sleeping in the arms of the lion. And the job of the lion is to take care of the lamb because the lamb is weak. And the metaphor is the strong protecting the weak, taking care of the weak. And that text is what is, to make my sharing short, that text is exploited by C.S. Lewis in Aslan the Lion. The one friend says to him, don't go, he's dangerous. Can't you see he's dangerous? He says, yes, he's dangerous, but he's harmless. So we need that lion again in our imagination and in our lives. The lion who protects the weak, the Dalits, the poor, the oppressed, the exploited.
I just wanted to ask that, do you think Subhash Chandra Bose's great love for Jana Gana Mana, and he popularized it by getting it translated into Hindustani, or the gist of it?
There's a whole bit in the book,
Oh,
on
there
that.
is, okay. I think that spread the love for Jana Gana Mana. Subhash Chandra Bose took it as a national anthem of India. Would you say? I haven't read your book. So
That's okay. Please buy it.
I have bought it.
Now I'll answer your question. But so Subhash Chandra Bose adopts Jana Gana Mana before any. I mean, there are two people who did it early. Okay, 1922, the first Bhajanavali that Gandhi publishes in Gandhi Ashram has 3 songs. It has Vande Mataram, because Gandhi also had an own association Vande Mataram to go through Gokhale, has Jana Gana Mana, and has Sare Jahan Se Acha. Okay, has all 3 songs. Now, Subhash does something very interesting. He is in Berlin, and at that time Jana Gana Mana is adopted. Then he moves to Southeast Asia, to Singapore and Malay, and then Abid Hassan is the person he asks, along with Mumtaz Hussain, to I won't say it's translated, it's not even gist. No, this is complete myself. It's actually a reimagination of Jana Gana Mana. Jana Gana Mana has 5 verses, this is 3 verses, and he does something fascinating. He writes it in Hindustani. And so there's a little bit of history here. So when I was writing this book, I've heard versions of it. It's there. Lakshmi Sehgal has sung it it's online. I think it's on YouTube. I've heard those versions, but I was still curious about, okay, is that an old notation? So I wrote to Sugata Bose, the historian, and I said, Sugata, do you know where we can get it? Is it there? He said, I can't find anything. There's no notation available for 1 year. And I left it. About a year and a half later, he sends me an email saying, guess what? I found an old notation. And it was published in Malay, probably 43 or 44. And actually, it has a woman on the cover. And we're like, who is this woman? Was she a conductor? And it was like interesting. And it's in staff notation. Actually, my student is here somewhere, Aditya. He was in the UK at that point of time. And I sent it to him. And I said, boss, can you orchestrate this using your synth or whatever and send it to me? Now, and then I heard it. I'm going to sing 2 lines from it. And it so happens somebody asks the question all the launches and I'll end up singing 2 lines from this, but I'm not complaining.
On Lakshmi Sehgal, her grandnephew's in the room, by the way.
Oh, okay. So the versions that you hear, including Lakshmi Sehgal's version, is pretty much Janagana Mana tune in Hindustani, right? So that's what I also presumed I will get in this old notation. And that's exactly what I thought will be there. But then the tune surprised me. There are little changes which I think I'm a musician, so I see meaning in the smallest of changes, and maybe other people won't hear it, but can you try and pay attention a little bit? It's more or less the same tune, but not the same tune. शुभ सुख चैन की बरखा बरसे भारत भाग है जागा. Okay? शुभ सुख चैन की बरखा बरसे भारत भाग है जागा. पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा. पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा. चंचल सागर विंध्य हिमाला नीला जमुना गंगा. तेरे नित गुण गाए तुझसे जीवन पाए सब तन पाए आशा. सूरज बन कर जग पर चमके. See all differences? Little things. सूरज बन कर. To me it's almost like this is the everyday person singing. जग पर चमके भारत नाम सुभागा. जय हो. Watch. जय हो. जय हो. Jaya 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 Ho. That's the catch for me. So it's very interesting to see what does it mean to turn a tune. Does meaning change? So if I go ascent and I pause in one place, if I just ascend and just drop it, meaning changes. Right? So in fact in this book there is this argument that a scholar from Sri Lanka makes to me, that the Sri Lankan anthem itself has a story that's interesting, and that point's even ridiculous. But in that, he argues that, Janagana Mana is I think something he says to the effect of it's a tune that is forward movement. So how do you see movement in tune? Because he says you end on the fourth, you don't end on a full stop, you end on a possibility, whereas the Sri Lankan anthem ends on a full stop. So it's very interesting. So I think what Subhash did with this song was more than just translate. Reimagined it musically, reimagined it in lyrics, and it has a different meaning. And I actually think that the India that we want is a conversation between Janagana Mana and Shubha Sukha Chaina. That's the India we need. That's in conversation. They're both incredible ideas, but they may not agree on everything. But that's good.
We have a question here. While you were singing, though, this is the other thing about, the current climate, right? While you were singing, I kept thinking, are we in violation of something or the other?
No. Should you stand up? Don't worry, you don't need to stand up. In fact, in Delhi, when I sang it, everybody got nervous because you're in Delhi. Like, Lord, stand up, boss. Like, no, you don't need to stand up for this. Don't worry about it. You're okay. Yeah.
We're not breaking the law.
No, you're not.
Ma'am, please.
Thank you both guys. It's been a great day. I have two observations, or one question, one request to TMK. One is that I have in the past gone for many, many book launches. I've never seen a more passionate writer than you have. The request I have is that, the books, after some time for people like me, my age, it's very difficult to keep reading. And also, when you're reading a book, you have your own imagination, which could be different from what the author wants you to understand. So, if you can come up with audiobooks, it would be great.
It will be. It will be done in audiobooks, that's for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing is, you had said that are we khadi or are we polyester? You'd asked that question.
I just raised the question.
You raised the question. My thing is, can we not be both? Because the thing is, you also said that we always change over a period of time. Maybe we can, for some things, be khadi, for something be polyester, something be silk. Right? That's it. Thank you.
Well, you could be.
Thank you.
But as long as you don't expect everyone to be khadi for the same things, polyester for the same
Absolutely.
thing, and the silk for the same
Absolutely.
thing, I'm okay with your
Yeah,
argument.
absolutely. That's true. Thank you.
Who's next? There's another lady
There's somebody
there.
there.
Yeah.
Lovely talk. Very interesting for me to, hear about how carefully we selected our symbols, our leaders, our national leaders around our independence, chose our symbols, went into details, talked, discussed at no end. Do you think we are doing the same, or the current policy makers are choosing our symbols?
I love, sorry, I'll just pause you there. I love the way, we want to express about current and we all like float around what words to use, but go ahead. We all do it, not just you, but just go ahead. But sorry, I'm just sorry, I had to let that.
I'm not censoring myself.
Okay, good. I'm just checking, but go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think the lines, today's aggressive, oppressive lines, were chosen with that amount of thinking and care and detail?
Can I add to that? Do you think it was just poor taste and poor aesthetics, or do you think it was actively chosen as
Now
we
you are
want?
really getting me into trouble because I'm going to make a very big generalization that a certain set of people have very bad aesthetic sense. But but that's going to be considered. No, but that apart, it could be a combination of both. I think it's not just one or the other. I think, if I look at it this way, I think the moment you want to create something, if there is an attitude, if there's a environment of a certain aggroness, if there's an environment of a certain attitude, I think it seeps into everything that you do around it, right? I'm not saying you look at, I want an angry lion. No. Right? But I think that the entire environment automatically transforms, influences the artist who's making it, the mold is making. Nobody's doing it like giving instructions. I'm not saying there was a memo sent, right? But I think that's the bigger problem with this poison, right? Nobody needs to say anything. The moment you create that ambience, that's all, it's going to happen. And the fact is that you can say, I had nothing to do with it. Some artist imagined it. Of course, it's true. But if you create an environment where that is what is a thing thought of to be a representation, and that's what we should be, right? To put crudely that we say up yours to everybody, if that's what you want to do, then you're going to have very, very aggressive kind of symbolism. And everybody's going to play to that narrative. Everybody's going to basically do that because they think that's the way you want it, right? So I think it's the environment. So the question is, can we change that? So let's ask ourselves that question, right? Can we change that environment in our little ways? Then I think that's something that's possible, I think. Yes. There's a question there.
Lots of questions emerging
There's
now.
Anand
Let's
there.
go back to this side, Mr. Anand Patwardhan.
No, but there's somebody, that
And
boy
there's
never come
someone-
to Anand.
How?
Yeah.
You have the mic. Then you can give it to Anand.
Good evening. So my question is about the national anthem, Jana Gana Mana. What is so unifying about the tune of Jana Gana Mana that it qualifies to be the national anthem of India?
A tune need not be unifying in that sense. I don't think any anthem goes about saying, can they be really a unifying tune for a diverse country like India? I don't think so. But I actually think, I actually was saying something this afternoon to somebody saying, actually Jana Gana is an unusual tune. You know it, so you don't think it's unusual. Okay? Like, I'm not going to sing it because I don't know what to stand for that. I'm really scared.
No. Let's
Okay.
not.
Okay. Da-da-da. Now, the second line, if a tune fell like that, will generally go approach to, say, a mid octave. The third line will generally approach top octave. Okay, and the summary will be at the end. Usually the curve is something like that. Or there'll be a closure in between and there'll be a second closure and third closure. These are like certain standard formats. You have a funny shift from Punjab. It's a very odd shift. Suddenly to move Punjab is a very interesting shift. So actually I think that Janagana Mana is an interesting tune by itself. Does it represent, now actually I disagree with Nehru vehemently in the book. Nehru makes an argument in the 40s that Vande Mataram is musically not good enough. And he says it's got to do with orchestration. Now we don't know which tune he's talking about, but nevertheless, I say he's wrong. I also make that argument. I say if he made an argument on basis of communalism and all that, I'll say okay, I get it. Because I actually think it's the Vande Mataram first tune, even the tune that we all sing is a lovely tune. Or Tagore's Vande Mataram Sujalam Shuphalam Malayaja Sheetalam Sashashamalam Mataram Vande Isn't this different Vande Mataram suddenly? I love this tune. I just love it. So I think that this tune could be sung because I give examples of I love the Bangladeshi anthem. I don't know how many of you have heard it. I just love it.
Also by Tagore.
Yeah, also Tagore. It's a stunning anthem. Or, if you could sing that. Or like the Bhutanese anthem, which is like almost a monastic chant. So, Nehru's aesthetic critic of the tune, for me, doesn't work. If he made a sociological critic, it works for me. So, I don't agree with him there. So, a tune is not necessarily a tune that has to represent all of India or whatever. But the question is that probably you will ask, is this tune accessible? I think it's a question of habit, most things. You sing it from childhood, it becomes singable. That's all. And it's something that you learn from childhood, you'll pick up, whether this tune or other tune. So, I think in terms of its text, it's definitely a representation of India. I have no doubts about it. Anand?
Yeah. Actually, Anand Teltumre couldn't be here because he's out of town. But you must have read Iconoclast.
Yes.
So one of the argument that the book seems to make, not that I agree with him, is that the Constitution is actually a serious compromise that was made, and the preamble, it doesn't show you a path to how to get there, what is in the preamble. So, I don't know if you want to talk to that.
So, I'll start with the preamble. So, if you just analyze preambles of the world, which I kind of briefly do in the book, preambles are never showing a path. In fact, many preambles almost have nothing. They almost say, on this date we give ourselves. So the preambles that say something are kind of vision documents, summary documents of what is appearing. It's like, we want a society that is has justice, has fraternity, whatever, right? So preamble is more like a lone star. Like it's a little summary. It's actually a symbol of the Constitution. So I don't believe preambles can give you direction one. Now, the compromise is not the word I'll use. That's why I probably disagree with Anand. I think it is a negotiation of many viewpoints that is happening, and I think we have to accept. For example, I critique Ambedkar in this on preventive custody, and we're talking about Anand right here, Anand Teltumble. And I think if anybody was one of the victims of preventive detention, which is there in our fundamental rights, it is Anand himself, right? Because if and Ambedkar was a votary of preventive detention. He in fact approved T.D. Krishnamachari's amendment, which was worse. So I disagree with Ambedkar there. And I think it had no place in a fundamentalist. I really get upset with all these judges who say UAPA is wrong. I want one judge to get up and say we should not have preventive detention. Not one judge says that. Why? Why are you so scared to say that only if you remove that? And how can fundamental rights have preventive detention? I mean, it's so bizarre. So I think there are errors, of course. And I think there are certain things that don't make sense. For me, directive principles, many times, it's a bunch of things that I can't read together. Right? Or the fact that citizens' duties. So we have a duty to take care of the environment. There's nothing that enforces that for the government, by the way, like directly. It's all and the interpretation. So these are all problems, and they are negotiations. There's also a time context. I think we have to also take the time context. 1947, 51, there are many things going around world over. There are pulls and pushes from different places. Are there lacunas? There are lacunas. Not compromises. I would say there are, we didn't go the whole hog for certain things. I agree. That I agree. We didn't go the whole hog. We left it in between. But I also asked the question whether the constitution is the place where implementation should be defined. Right? And I think that Ambedkar also addresses that issue of the executive role. If there is one flaw, if you want to use it a flaw, in the constitution, not a flaw, if there's an over-dependence on something, I'll rephrase, is to believe that the executive will do right. That, I think, was a problem. And that, I would say, was we believed that the executive, we gave too much to the executive and thought it will do right. And I think, I also tried to think, why did Ambedkar do this? And I have some theories in my own head on why. But I think that is something that I think we should not have done. Cooperative federalism all sounds good, but I don't think we should have done that. So these are all little negotiations, little pullbacks, and not gone the whole hog. But is it a compromise? I don't know whether that's the word I would necessarily use. Is it incomplete? Yes. But should it be a document of implementation? No. That I don't think the constitution can be document of implementation. No, I don't think so.
I think, where's the mic?
I go back to the songs. I mean, the two songs we discussed, but both of them were some kind of marching songs, I think. Janagana Mana made a very good marching tune, did it? Because, I think Subhash gave that particular angle to it. Because, he used it in the INA as a marching song. Am I right?
I don't know whether Subhash gave it. So you have to look at orchestration. You're asking complicated question because we looked at different orchestrations of it also. The orchestration of Jana Gan Mana, which was done in Berlin by Subhash, we even know how much he paid for it, by the way. It's there in the book, and that's a different orchestration. The orchestration that we have for Jana Gan Mana now, I don't know how many people even use it, but there is actually a notated orchestration by Murrell and Richardson, and it was recorded by the BBC BBC Symphony Orchestra in London. That's the first big recording that happened. It's not as marchy as the German version that happens when Subhash puts it to place in Berlin, in Hamburg actually, sorry. Hamburg Orchestra. So, is it a marching song? See, again, I wonder, should an anthem be a marching song? These are questions that I raise. And I think, for example, the Bangladesh anthem is not a marching song. I think there are some of these obsessions that we still have that had then. That an anthem must be something that you can march with. That the drums beat skin. I think Nehru probably had some of these hang-ups. Okay. Seriously. I really think he did. Or he had bad advisors around him. Right, one of the two. So this idea that the anthem should sound a certain way, internationally should be acceptable. Exactly. I think those things were things, right?
That's the kind of thing.
So I think those are all issues, and I don't necessarily agree with that kind of an imagination. As a musician, I probably have a slightly different take to that. So,
second thing is about the constitution. You said, when you said timing is everything. I mean, when constitution was written, what was India's, goal at that time? I mean, we were supposed to be a very peace-oriented kind of a country. I mean, we had decided that we are not going to have any enemies. We're not going to have, too much of importance given to standing armies and all that kind of stuff. That was the environment in which, the constitution was drawn up. Did you see any pacifist kind of a side to it in the text?
I don't think the constitution is pacifist in that sense. I really don't think we have a pacifist or a constitution. We give ourselves death penalty, mind you. What is pacifist of a constitution that say death penalty is fine? We're still fighting. People say, we have to get it back. By the way, I addressed death penalty in the book too. There's nothing pacifist about us if you could not say sedition should not be there. If you could not say that there should be death penalty. If you had done that, I'll say I would have celebrated it. So I don't think we're really pacifists in that sense. I mean, we use certain symbols that were not aggressive. Yes. We didn't want to be an aggressive nation. Something that actually Rajaji says much before. That he clearly says that, our flag is not an aggressive flag. It's not a vanquisher's flag. It's a different flag. So I think that that's what they were looking for. I mean, whether that translates to some kind of pacifism, I don't really think so. But I think it's miraculous that we survived.
Can I just flip that a little bit? Do you think that so-called pacifist or passive-looking symbols, etc., was actually a mark of some kind of security and confidence versus today's slightly more aggressive ones, which at some level are masking some kind of insecurity, at least in my mind? It feels like if you have to be so obvious with your symbols, maybe you're insecure, whereas the people who created them were far more confident of who they were and didn't feel the need to.
I completely agree with that interpretation of it. I think maybe they're insecure is probably mild. They are insecure is possibly what I think. Of course they are. I mean, that's true of all of people we know, right? Generally a person who is overtly throwing themselves on your face, is actually has, what we say, issues, right? So, yeah, I think that there is this, which is why, for example, I mean, just look at if there's any discussion today on something that's happening today, the answer is never about today. It's about what happened in 1955 or 1972 or 1963. That itself is, I think, clearly tells you that there is an insecurity about something here. And I think then you need your symbols to be these very overtly aggressive things. I think you're spot on in that observation. I think it's true. Yeah.
All right, we'll take one last question from that young boy there, because it's well past 8:30, and I think the organizers.
Okay, so I have a question for both of you. How do you view the colloquial argument from individuals who subscribe to the right-wing ideology that we should delete the term socialist and secular from the preamble? So how do you both view that argument?
You want to go?
You actually address some of that in the book.
But take a stab at it.
You finish. I mean, I think your point is the point, which is that even if you remove these words, socialist, I don't know, but secular, for instance, it is already in some ways ingrained in the thing. You don't really need the word over there. The spirit and the principle is already there. So
yeah, that's exactly what I say in the book. I said, one thing is, how did we understand secularism? First of all, we have to go there. We did not understand secularism like the French. Okay, that has to be first understood. And actually, if you see, and I write about in the book, that the French, when they chose to be secular in that very strident way, if I can say that, they were a homogeneous nation of white people, or mainly Christians. Now just look at what has happened to their secularism today. It's become a violent thing. They're attacking communities. They're saying you can't show any symbol in public. That's violence. Okay? That's never the secularism that we adopted. In fact, there was a discussion on whether God should be mentioned in the preamble. It's a very interesting discussion, and there's also an entire quote from one of the Constituent Assembly members, which is hilarious. Okay, which is actually hilarious. It's satire. Its entire thing is satire. So and it goes to vote, by the way. And it was decided God will not be there. The same Constituent Assembly did not include the word secular. Now, that's the magic. That they didn't see a necessity for either of these two words because the protection of religious rights is already there. The idea that you can pray to who you want is already there. The idea that you don't need to, that's why you have conscience, you don't need to pray. It can be just your conscience if you're a rationalist atheist. That's already there. So I don't need to mention God. I don't need to mention that idea of secular. So we can't just understand secular separation of state and all that, and religion. No, it's something far more than that. And I think it's to the credit of our constitution makers that they recognize that these two words don't. Even I would argue socialism is already there if you look at the fundamental rights and look at what we say. And we forget it's not just religious minority. We talk about linguistic minority. Why is nobody talking about that? Cultural minorities. If you say you're going to remove all this, remember what will you do with linguistic minorities? What will you do with all the tribals in Northeast? Very conveniently use Actually, we have all been trapped into using minority only in one way. We have also been trapped. We should be asking, okay, fine boss, what about other minorities? Tell me what you'll do with tribal population. So when they say they want uniform civil code, they don't know what to do. Because they know there's a tribal population. And they're like, oh my God, now what do I do? And then so, yeah, exactly, right? So it is understood already. So I actually say in this book, the inclusion of those words has created a problem that would have never been created. Because it is already there. And you included the words, and now you're allowed for this discourse to say, if the words are removed, I'm saying remove it. even then we are still secular. Unless you change the fundamental rights of this country, okay, the fact that we are a compassionate society, which I think is the fundamentals of socialism, the fact that you want distribution of wealth, distribution of rights, distribution of everything among all people, especially those, and you do prioritize minorities, you do say that I'm going to say what Manmohan Singh said, and I think what he said was very important, have first right on all this. It's a profoundly beautiful statement that he made that has been completely manipulated to be something else. The point he was making is those who are in the margins do have to, that is what equity is all about. That's all there. That is the spirit of socialism. This is the spirit of secularism. So it's already there, and unless you write a new constitution, it's not going anywhere.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Our favorite anti-national will be signing books next. We ran well over time, but I think it was worth it.
No, I want to thank Manu for this absolutely splendid conversation and for digging into spaces that I had not thought of and allowing me to respond to those spaces. Thank you.
So long as neither of us gets into trouble. That's my
It
favorite.
almost seems like he's going to run away from here and catch the flight out.